Good morning. Good morning for the second session of the day. I welcome our resource person, Mrs. Jacqueline Chelizri, for this talk on regulatory affairs. At the onset, I would just give a brief introduction about her. Presently, she's a General Manager, Regulatory Affairs, Ajanta Pharma Limited. She has a rich experience of more than 23 years in regulatory affairs. She has worked for companies like Cipla, Unichem, Ajanta Pharma. She has an experience and cross-functional expertise with excellent skills in designing robust and effective regulatory strategies with successful outcomes. Responsible for regulatory submissions mainly for USA, WHO, and some of the emerging markets at Ajanta. As a regulatory professional, she has contributed on various regional and country-specific regulatory affairs strategies. She has been instrumental in liaising with the central and global health authorities, influencing and shaping drug regulatory policy frameworks for the organizations served. Ma'am has been part of the core team for product divestment and instrumental in advising and analyzing from regulatory and pharmacovigilance standpoint. To her credit, she has filed over 68 ANDAs and has faced over 10 regulatory inspections without any major or critical citations. She has constantly strived to provide good leadership and sound technical backing to keep organizations in creative compliance. She has excellent working knowledge of key international regulations pertaining to US FDA, EMEA, WHO, and emerging markets of the pharmaceutical industry. She has taken various challenging roles in areas including bioequivalence, pharmacovigilance, and API lifecycle management. Her achievements include providing faster approvals for first cycle approvals of the products filed with US FDA and WHO, guiding the team to enable day one product launches in US market, providing first generic status to 2 anti-malarial products approved by WHO Geneva for Ajanta. She has set up the electronic filing system for US in Ajanta and has a key role in providing technical expertise in life cycle management of approved products to enhance productivity and also to reduce manufacturing costs of the company. Prior to her current role, she has been responsible for global regulatory affairs in Unichem and analytical development in Cipla. At Unichem, she was responsible for their first ANDA filing with US FDA. In her tenure at Cipla, she was responsible for the method development and validations for the emerging markets and US projects. Indeed, it is a very inspiring biodata, and I'm very proud to introduce our alumni of KLE, and I've been very closely associated with her. She has strived hard to attain this level. So welcome, Jacqueline, for the session to this session, and I hand over to you.
Thank you, ma'am, for this extremely generous introduction. Firstly, I would like to thank Dr. Jalal Pure for inviting me as a resource person for this QIP organized by our college and for giving me this platform to share my experience with you all. Being an alumni of this college, it definitely makes it even more memorable. A special thank you to my guide, Dr. Rajeshri Masareddy, who was instrumental during my post-graduation and who encouraged me to excel. Last but not the least, I would also like to thank Dr. Anjana Pujjar, who was consistent in her efforts to get me conduct this webinar. Thank you, Anjana. I graduated from the 1992 batch and came back to this college to do my master's in 2003. The growth of our college as on date is phenomenal in comparison to what I look back to the earlier days. And this credit, I must say, it goes to each one of you. This initiative being taken and keeping in trends with the industry will be resourceful to the students. So in the interest of time, I feel it's better we get started with the purpose of today's agenda. We'll start with the presentation. I don't promise that it will be a boring session. I will try to make it as interesting. So an overview of generic, that is the ANDA filings to the US FDA. Highlights of the presentation includes regulatory affairs, a small talk on that, Hatch-Waxman Act, the Orange Book, drugs at FDA, NDA and ANDA, generic drug review process, drug master file, ECTD, pre-approval and post-approval submissions in ANDAs, generic drug user fee act, also known as GDUFA, and references. I'm sure some of these topics may be already known to you, but nevertheless, we can just have a quick refresher session. So what is regulatory affairs all about? So it's a profession developed from the desire of governments to protect public health by controlling safety and efficacy of products in areas including pharmaceuticals, veterinary medicines, medical devices, pesticides, agrochemicals, and cosmetics. The regulatory affairs is an interface between the pharmaceutical company and the regulatory agencies across the world. So it's basically a bridge between the company and the regulatory agency. So regulatory affairs, it's by no means boring. It's quite interesting. The role of regulatory affairs is basically to provide documents to the regulatory agency, to keep track on change in legislation, and to give strategic and technical advice to R&D, production, and quality control department. So the role of a regulatory or a RA professional includes in all stages of drug development and also after the drug approval and marketing. Pharmaceutical companies, they use data that is accumulated during the drug development in order to register the drug and subsequently market the product. Throughout this process, companies have to abide by strict rules and guidelines to ensure safety and efficacy of the drug in humans. Even after the drug is approved, the regulatory affairs personnel plays an important role in the life cycle management of the drug product together with pharmacovigilance activities. So I have listed some of the different regulatory authorities, though it's not a comprehensive list, but just few, put them in the alphabetical order. So we have the TGA in Australia, Anvisa in Brazil, Health Canada, the state FDA in China, EMEA in Europe, Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare in Japan, CDSCO in India, COFEPRIS in Mexico, CIS in Russia, MCC in South Africa, the US FDA, and the UK MHRA. So these are the regulatory bodies that govern these particular countries. Now, coming to this Hatch-Waxman Act. So although the FDNC, that is the Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act, made it possible for generic companies to get regulatory approvals for drugs by filing ANDAs, that is abbreviated new drug applications. In the early 80s, it became clear that very few generics were actually coming into the market. So when the situation was assessed, it became clear that patent and regulatory law was making it easy for the innovator companies to make it difficult for generic companies to successfully file ANDAs. And besides, the regulatory pathway to get the ANDAs approved was irregular and uncertain. So that's when this Drug Price Competition and Patent Term Restoration Act of 1984, also known as the Hatch-Waxman Amendment Act, came into picture and established that bioequivalence as the basis for approving generic versions of drug products. So these amendments permitted FDA to approve applications to market generic versions of the brand product without repeating costly and duplicative clinical trials to establish safety and efficacy. Under the Hatch-Waxman Amendment, brand companies they gain patent term extension to account for the time that the patent product is covered under review by the FDA and also gain certain periods of market exclusivity. In addition, the ANDA approval pathway, the generic companies gain the ability to challenge the patents in court prior to marketing, as well as a 180-day generic drug exclusivity. So some of the key Hatch-Waxman concepts in FDA&C Act: listing of patent, certifying to patents, notification of patent challenge, 30-month stay of approval, and 180-day exclusivity. An NDA sponsor must identify in their NDA application those patents related to drug product, drug substance, or method of use for which the approval is being sought. So once this gets identified, FDA will list that patents in the Orange Book. Generics must then certify with respect to each patent that is listed for that RLD in the Orange Book. So once an ANDA is filed and the generic applicant has certified in the application about the patent that which with it lists, the FDA then notifies the applicant that the ANDA is sufficiently complete to review, and the applicant has the responsibility to notify the NDA or the patent holder of P4 certifications. In subsequent slides, we will learn more of the patent certifications. So as we saw in the earlier slide, an ANDA applicant is required to notify an NDA holder of the P4 certification, that is the paragraph 4 certification. So when an NDA sponsor gets the certification, he can file a suit against the ANDA applicant when the notice is received. So this infringement lawsuit starts when the ANDA is filed and prior to the ANDA approval. If the NDA sponsor sues within 45 days of receipt of notice, then that particular ANDA gets stayed for 30 months. In case if there is no lawsuit filed within 45 days, then FDA can approve the ANDA when it is ready. 180-day exclusivity is a reward for ANDA applicants that challenge patents, potentially hastening generic market entry. 180-day exclusivity is only available to first to file ANDAs containing the P4 certification. Now, coming to what is all about patent certification. So, when a generic manufacturer files an ANDA to the FDA, it must make one of the 4 possible certifications. P1 certification, where there is no patent listed. P2 certification, where the listed patent has expired and you get an immediate approval. P3 certification, applicant does not seek to market until the listed patent expires. P4 certification, patent is listed and applicant seeks to market before the patent expires. Tentatively, so once the patent certifications are through and the ANDA is substantially complete, then FDA issues either a tentative approval or a full approval. So let's learn what this tentative approval is all about. So tentative approval is when an ANDA is ready for approval, but it is blocked by patent exclusivity or stay. And it will be, so such kind of ANDAs are only eligible for tentative approval. And a tentatively approved ANDA must request for full approval. Full approval is not an automatic after tentative approval. So after a tentative approval, an applicant is supposed to go back to FDA and show FDA that they still meet the requirements at the time of full approval. That is, in terms of the GMP of the facility, in terms of that no additional information was given from the time the product was tentatively approved until the final approval. Now, what's all this big thing about this P4 certification? So under the Hatch-Waxman Act, a company can seek FDA's approval to market a generic drug before the expiration of patents related to the brand drug that the generic seeks to copy. So a generic applicant must provide in its application a certificate that a patent submitted to FDA by the brand's drug sponsor and listed in the OB is invalid, unenforceable, or will not be infringed by the generic product. So if I want to file a P4 certification, I have to submit to agency a certification saying that the patent that is given, that is listed by the RLD, against which we find, into the best of our knowledge, it is invalid, it is unenforceable, and it will not be infringed by my product. So this certification is what is called as the P4 certification. So the first company or companies which will submit such an application is determined, which the agency determines to be substantially complete on submission and contains a P4 certification to at least one of the patents listed in the OB is generally eligible for exclusive rights to market the generic drug for 180 days. Now coming to exclusivity. Exclusivity is exclusive marketing rights which is granted by the FDA on approval of a drug and can run concurrently with the patent or not. Orphan drugs has an exclusivity term of 7 years. New chemical entity, 5 years exclusivity term. Pediatric exclusivity gets an added 6 months bonus. Other exclusivity gets 3 years for a change if the criteria is met. And patent challenge is 180 days, which is exclusively for the ANDAs. So exclusivity basically prevents FDA from approving ANDAs or 505(b)(2) NDAs based on the listed drug that enjoys the exclusivity period. So now coming to the Orange Book. In the previous slides, we did see the mention of Orange Book. So coming to what all about Orange Book is. It is basically the approved drug products with therapeutic equivalence evaluations. So the OB, it contains list of all the FDA approved drug products, NDAs, ANDAs, and OTCs. It includes the patent and exclusivity expiration dates. Reference listed drugs. So these are specific listed drug on which the ANDA applicant relies in seeking approval of its ANDA. So in an ANDA, we have something called as a basis of submission. So there we have to very clearly state which is the RLD against which the ANDA is being filed. Reference standard is a drug product which is selected by FDA that an applicant seeking approval of an ANDA must use in conducting an in vivo bioequivalence study required for approval of an ANDA. So basically, reference standard is the strength against which a bioequivalence study has to be done. I'll just take you to the next slide just to show how the Orange Book looks. I'm sure you may be familiar with it, but if not, then we can just look at it. So this is how the page of an Orange Book looks like. So here you have these information. You can search any product by its proprietary name, active ingredient, or the application number. Then and then you get the details that were mentioned in the earlier page. I'll just take you to the next slide. So when we go into each, like suppose I am searching for one particular moiety and I click it, and then I will be given this information. So here, what we learned in the previous slides about the RLD, about the RS is given. I'll just take you back to this slide, okay, to give you some inputs of how was the scenario before 2017. So prior to 2017, the column in the Orange Book labeled RLD at times indicated that drug product FDA selected as the reference standard. So this led to a lot of confusion. And therefore, FDA in 2017 modified this to clearly state which is the RLD and which is the reference standard. So if the applicant has any questions with regard to which is the RLD, okay, then in such a case, an applicant can submit a controlled correspondence to FDA prior to submission of its ANDA. Now, sometimes we may see that the FDA has not designated any RLD for the drug product. And in such a case, applicant would need to submit a controlled correspondence to FDA asking it to designate an RLD for that product. Now, similarly, it goes for a reference standard. So if there is no reference standard in the active sections of the Orange Book for a drug product, then an applicant can submit a controlled correspondence to FDA asking it to select a reference standard for that particular drug product. Now, there may be situations where there is a reference standard in the active section for a drug product which the applicant intends to duplicate, but there are limited or there are no quantities in distribution. Many times we have come across this, that we want to go ahead, but we find that there is not sufficient quantities for the study, for the bioequivalence study. And then in such a case, we go back to the agency, to the FDA, and through a controlled correspondence, asking them, explaining to them the situation and requesting them that if we can select a different listed drug as a reference standard. So when the RLD is marketed, ordinarily it is also the drug product selected by the FDA as the reference standard. But where the RLD has been discontinued from marketing for reasons other than safety and effectiveness, then FDA may select a different approved drug to serve as the reference standard. Now, in instances in which FDA cannot select the RLD as a reference standard, and there are multiple approved generic products which refer to the RLD, then FDA selects the generic market leader, which means that particular manufacturer, okay, who has the maximum units sold as a reference standard. So now, like the Orange Book, there's something called as a drugs at FDA also, which allows you to search for official information about FDA approved innovator, the generic drugs, and therapeutic biological products. Now, drugs at FDA contain prescription and over-the-counter human drugs.
Here are some results from a search.
And over-the-counter human drugs and therapeutic biologics currently approved for sale in the United States. The main uses of drugs at FDA are finding labels for approved drug products, finding generic drug products for an innovator drug product, finding therapeutically equivalent drug products for an innovator or a generic product, and viewing the approval history of a drug. So this is how a drugs at FDA page looks like. Again, here you can feed in the drug name, the active ingredient, or the application number if known to you. And then what is seen is this. So when I click into each of these, like any specific moiety that are molecule which I'm looking into, then I can get all these information, which is the labels, who are the generic drug products, which are the therapeutically equivalent drug products to the innovator, and also the history of the drug. This is history of the approval history is only for the RLD. Now coming to type of application. There are basically 5 types of applications to the FDA: INDs, NDAs, ANDAs, biologics, license application, and OTCs. A quick look, just brush up maybe to the just the definitions of these INDs, NDAs, and BLAs and OTCs. So During a new drug's early preclinical development, the sponsor's primary goal is to determine if the product is reasonably safe for initial use in humans and if the compound exhibits pharmacological activity that justifies commercial development. So when such a product gets identified as a viable candidate for further development, the sponsor focuses on collecting this data and information necessary to establish that the product will not expose humans to unnecessary risk when used in limited early stage of clinical trials. FDA's role in the development of a new drug begins when the drug sponsor, having screened the new molecule for pharmacological activity and acute toxicity potential in animals, wants to test its diagnostic or therapeutic potential in humans. So at that point, the molecule changes its legal status under the FDNC Act and becomes a new drug subject to specific requirement of the drug regulatory system. Now, what's an NDA? So when the sponsor of a new drug believes that enough evidence on the drug safety and effectiveness has been obtained to meet FDA's requirements of marketing approval, the sponsor submits to FDA a new drug application. So what does this application include? Mainly data on chemistry, pharmacology, medical, biopharmaceutics, and statistics. So if the NDA gets approved, then the product gets marketed in the US. For internal tracking purpose, all NDAs, like the ANDAs, are assigned an NDA number. So coming to ANDAs. So these generic drug applications are generally called as abbreviated because they're not required to include preclinical and clinical data to establish safety and effectiveness. Instead, a generic applicant must scientifically demonstrate that its product is bioequivalent. That is, it performs in the same manner as the innovator drug. So once an ANDA gets approved, an applicant may manufacture and market the generic product to provide a safe, effective, and a low-cost alternative to the brand product. All the approved products, both the innovator as well as the generics, they are listed in the orange book. Now, BLAs are biologic license application, which contains information on the process, chemistry, pharmacology, clinical pharmacology, and medical effects of the product. So if all the information provided meets the statutory requirements of FDA, then it is approved and the license is issued. Some of the examples of these therapeutic biological products include monoclonal antibodies, growth factors, enzymes, proteins intended for therapeutic use, which are derived from animals, and non-vaccine therapeutic immunotherapies. Now, coming to OTCs. OTC drug products are those drugs that are available to consumers without a prescription. Now, there are more than 80 therapeutic categories of the OTCs, right? Ranging from acne drug products to weight control drug products. Like the prescription drugs, CIDR oversees the OTC drugs to ensure that they are properly labeled and that their benefits outweigh their risk. So I'll take you through a couple of slides to show what is the difference between an NDA and an ANDA. So NDA is submitted for new molecular entity, new formulation of previously approved drug, new combination of 2 or more drugs, and for a new indication for an already marketed drug. NDA is submitted based on the FDA and CE Act 505B1 and B2. Now, what's a 505B1? It's a traditional NDA. The pathway is used by sponsors to obtain the approval of a new drug whose active ingredients have not previously been approved. This requires extensive research, including clinical, non-clinical studies, to prove that the product is safe and effective for the indication that is being sought for. Because of the substantial amount of the research and data that is required, 505B1 NDA submissions will take many years to complete and requires a significant amount of resources to get approved. 505(b)(2) application. The product in question contains the similar inactive ingredients to a previously approved drug. So the data included in the submission can rely at least partially on the agency's finding of safety and effectiveness related to another product. If a sponsor reformulated a drug so that it can take in a liquid form instead of a tablet or capsule form, then the company could use the 505(b)(2) pathway to minimize the amount of original data it would need to submit in support of its new drug. The FDA will then rely upon the existing data showing that the reference drug is safe and effective, allowing the agency to focus more on determining whether the changes made to the new drug will alter its safety and efficacy. Shorter drug development program that requires less resources if you go by the 505(b)(2) pathway. Now coming to the ANDA. So a generic drug, as we saw, is the same as the brand product in terms of active ingredient, conditions of use, dosage form, strength, route of administration. So to obtain an approval of a generic drug, a company must submit an ANDA, that is an abbreviated new drug application, to FDA and prove that its product is the same as the brand product. A generic product must also meet the same standards of quality and manufacturing as the brand product. An ANDA applicant is not required to provide independent evidence of safety and effectiveness of the generic product, but instead the applicant relies on FDA's findings that a previously approved drug product is safe and effective. Therefore, an ANDA generic drug development is generally less costly to obtain approval of a generic drug than a brand product. So the requirements for an NDA versus an ANDA. In terms of NDA, you need to give chemistry, manufacturing, testing, labeling, inspections, animal studies, clinical studies, bioavailability. Whereas in the ANDA, we do not need to provide the animal clinical studies and substitute it with the bioequivalence study. So what is the review process? How does the review process for an NDA and ANDA differs? And NDA, you obviously, because of the cost and the time involved, you're generally seeing a lower volume. So you in the year 2019, there were around 45 approvals. In comparison, for ANDA, in 2019, there were more than 800 approvals. So we can see that the volume is definitely higher for an ANDA. In NDA, it is highly complex, and in terms of the preclinical and the clinical study that has to be done. And whereas for an ANDA, the complexity is much less because the safety and the efficacy has already been established. For an NDA, we have with FDA pre-submission face-to-face meeting. That's the IND phases in the initial IND phases. Whereas in ANDAs, in simple ANDAs, we do not have a pre-submission face-to-face meeting. But however, we have it in case of complex generics. For an NDA, what is to be given is something called as a PDUFA from 1992. That is the fee that is involved in giving to the FDA. Whereas in case of ANDA, it is the generic drug user fee that has to be given from 2013 onwards. So prior to 2013, there was no fee involved for the US submissions, generic submissions. But then after 2013, the fee implementation became a mandate and applicants had to provide the PDUFA fees. So now coming to the generic drug review process. So filing review is conducted basically to determine whether the application is sufficiently complete to permit a substantive review. So once an applicant is ready with the ANDA, they submit it to the FDA. Then FDA will provide either an acceptance or a refuse to receive letter based on the completeness of the ANDA. So what happens is during FDA's filing review of submitted ANDA, FDA determines if there are any major or minor deficiencies. So this is basically through a checklist which they have. So if FDA determines that an ANDA contains fewer than 10 minor deficiencies, that is maybe 9 deficiencies, FDA will notify the applicant of the deficiencies through any means like phone, fax, email. Okay, and the FDA will provide the applicant the opportunity to correct these minor deficiencies or amend the ANDA within 7 calendar days. If within 7 calendar days the requested information is not received, FDA will then RTR or refuse to receive the ANDA. However, in case where FDA determines that an ANDA contains 10 or more minor deficiencies or 1 or more major deficiencies, FDA will not consider that particular ANDA to be substantially complete for review, and in such case, they will notify the applicant that the FDA considers the ANDA not to have been received. So then if the applicant decides to submit additional information to correct the deficiencies, the resulting amended ANDA will be considered a new ANDA, and it will be received as the date when the new amended ANDA was submitted. And also in this case, the ANDA applicant will need to pay the new ANDA fee. So that means if you have already paid, you had initially paid the ANDA fee, and then you get to receive that it is not complete, it's not acceptable for review. In that case, you have to resubmit the ANDA and then pay the new fee. So if an ANDA is not received and the applicant does not take an action, then FDA may consider that the ANDA is withdrawn after 1 year. And ANDA applicant's failure to take action after a RTR decision on an ANDA may be considered a request by the applicant to withdraw the ANDA, unless, of course, the applicant requests for an extension of time. But these, however, these are exceptions, and it depends on a case-to-case basis, which FDA will consider based upon the merits of such circumstances. So what are the disciplines in filing? So once an ANDA is given, there are various disciplines that comes forward for review. So we have the chemistry review, we have a bioequivalence and biopharmaceutics, labeling and facility inspection. This is a broad class. So coming into the chemistry review, so in an ANDA, these are all the sections or the components which gets reviewed by the various disciplines at the FDA. So the chemistry review basically includes the reviewing the drug substance and drug product for components and composition, manufacturing and controls, batch formulation and records, facilities, product specification, packaging, stability. Bioequivalence review. So here the reviewer will look into the clinical section, bioanalytical section, and statistical section. Then it will be reviewed whether an appropriate in vitro dissolution method was selected. And if a bio waiver was applied for, based upon the data presented, it will be granted. The FDA will also review the bioequivalence protocols. So you have a different set of discipline reviews even for the labels. So basically for the review, for the label review, they expect that the generic should be the same as the brand name labeling, except of course with certain exceptions in terms of patent or in terms of exclusivity. So the labeling text should reflect differences in excipients, specific pharmacokinetic data, how supplied information, that is a packaging container, then the pharmacy practice issues so as to prevent any medication errors. Otherwise, it has to be the same as the innovator. Now, the labeling, where it can differ from the brand is it should exclude portions of the label which is protected by patent or exclusivity in the R&D. Now, coming to inspections. All facilities used for manufacturing, testing, packaging, storing the drug substance and drug products are subject for inspections and must be in compliance at the time of approval. So inspection program is also designed to check the data integrity. If data integrity is in question, all reviews will stop. Type of inspection includes pre-approval, post-approval, and for a particular cause. Now, we have been seeing in the industry that many ANDA approvals are being held up because of facility inspections, because many of the pharma companies, in terms of API or in terms of the finished pharmaceutical products, when they are reviewed, when they are inspected by FDA, there are citations given in terms of 483s being issued, or in terms of um, notice letter or warning letters. Okay, so for all these reasons, if that ANDA is under review, the approval gets withheld until the site is clear. So once all the review disciplines are clear and the ANDA is acceptable in terms of facilities, okay, and as well as the other disciplines, then the FDA grants the full approval or tentative approval. We saw that a full approval includes all the valid patents and exclusivities have been expired of the RLD, and there are no legal issues that can block the ANDA. Tentative approval, if at all there are any unexpired patents and exclusivities, then a tentative approval is issued. So basically, the generic drug review process includes the procedure has been explained in this slide. So an applicant files an ANDA, it goes in for review. It's either acceptable and complete, then yes. If it is no, then you get the refuse to receive letter. If it is yes, then you correct it and you give it back, and then it goes back into the yes mode. And then these are the 4 disciplines where it goes for review: the inspection, chemistry and micro, labeling, and the bioequivalence. So if there is, if all the reviews are complete, then you get an approved ANDA. In case any of the disciplines are, any deficiency is being given, then the ANDA gets approved only after the satisfactory response is received from the applicant. So as we can see in the slide, until the site is clear, the ANDA approval is held. So it's not only the slide, it's even any other disciplines, any of those 4 disciplines, if it is not cleared, then the ANDA approval gets withheld. So what is coming to now, since we saw about the review process and all, let's look into what goes into this ANDA application in terms of drug substance. So most of these generic drug product manufacturers, they rely on the third parties for the drug substance. So the drug substance manufacturers, they submit what is called a DMF to FDA, which is used to provide confidential information on the facilities, processes, articles used in the manufacturing process, processing, packaging, and storing of one or more drugs. So when we say that we rely on, when a finished product manufacturer relies on a DMF, so what they give us is only the open part of the DMF, which is for does not have any confidential information. So the confidential information is shared by the DMF holder to FDA. The open part of the DMF is shared with the finished product manufacturer, which we use in our ANDA application. So coming to this DMFs, so the various types of DMFs we have tried to explain here. In the US, we call it as a US DMF. In the Europe, it is addressed as the EDMF or the ASMF, Active Substance Master File. For WHO, we call it as the API-MF, that is the actual Active Pharmaceutical Ingredient Master File. So what are the various type of DMFs? You have a type 1 DMF, which is no longer applicable now because it is mainly involved with the manufacturing sites, facilities, operating procedures, and personnel. Type 2 DMF is the drug substance, intermediate, and material used in the preparation of the drug product. Type 3 is a packaging material. Now, FDA does not require that packaging information be submitted in a DMF. Type 4 is the DMF from the excipient, colorant, flavor, or material used in their preparation. Type 5 is FDA now discourages its use. So when we come to a DMF review, DMFs are neither approved nor they are disapproved. a DMF is reviewed to determine whether it is adequate to support the particular application that references it. So like the ANDA applicant, the drug substance manufacturer, they too have the responsibility of submitting their DMF to the FDA. And that gets referenced only when the ANDA references that particular drug substance. Okay, and then FDA takes it up for review. So until then, it is not reviewed. So for the DMF, there's something called as completeness assessment, which is basically for the DMF holders. So what is this all about? A completeness assessment, it's a series of questions that must be satisfied for a DMF to be made publicly available on FDA's website. So FDA has a checklist, so where they will see if the information that was provided in the closed part of the DMF by the DMF drug substance manufacturer is complete. Okay, and if the fees have been paid. If such a situation exists, then that becomes available in the public domain in a completeness assessment list. So a list of DMS that have passed the completeness assessment are available for reference by ANDAs under the GADU form. So if I have to decide which which drug substance manufacturer I need to use for my product, I can see which has been approved. Okay, I will prefer to take one which is approved. Not approved, sorry, which is there in the completeness assessment list. Now, what is a dossier? A dossier is a collection or file of documents that contain all the technical data of pharmaceutical product to be approved, registered, marketed in a country. It is most commonly called as registration dossier. In the US, we call it as an NDA or an ANDA. In Europe, we name it as marketing authorization application. So this documents in a dossier, it goes in a particular format, which is a common technical document. So it's a format which is set by the ICH, which has been agreed by regulatory agencies of Europe, Japan, and the US. So the electronic version of it is called as the ECTD. So these are the various modules in a ECTD. So this is something I'm sure you must be already aware of. So this is the format. Module 1 is the administrative information that goes. Module 2 is the summary section. Module 3 is the quality CMC section. Module 4 does not go in an ANDA. Non-clinical study reports are not a requirement for the ANDAs. Module 5 is the clinical study reports. So I have given here the reference for a content and format of an ANDA that can be referenced. So module 1 is administrative information. So where the certificate, it includes the certifications, that is patent, exclusivity, bio waiver, right of reference, the US agent letter, letter of access, debarment. US agent letter you have both for the finished product manufacturer as well as for the active substance, for the active pharmaceutical ingredient. We have in module 1 the FDA forms that goes. What is the basis of submission? We saw in the earlier slide, the basis of submission is RLD. So then that becomes one of the sections in the module 1. Comparison between the generic and the RLD. Then the labeling and proof of payment. So this is what goes in the administrative part that goes in module 1. Module 2, it's basically the quality overall summary, the CTD summaries of all the sections in the modules. So that's the TOC, you have the introduction, QoS, 2.4, 2.5, 2.6 are not part of the ANDA generic applications. 2.7 is the clinical summary. Module 3, again, here you have information. This is where the major chunk goes. You have information here being given on the drug substance, drug product, and the regional information. And literature references. Module 4, that's the non-clinical study data reports, but that is again not applicable for the ANDA. Module 5, we give the tabular listing of all the studies that have done, the clinical study reports, as well as the literature reference. So we saw basically what is the format of the modules that goes in the CTD. Now, how are these submissions done? So the final guidance for the electronic submissions by US FDA was published in the year 2015, and most of the drug submissions were required to be submitted electronically by May 2017. So the electronic submissions are required to be mandatory in the ECTD format. Now, since May 2017, 99.6% ANDA, BLAs, and NDA submissions have been in ECTD format. DMF files are mandatory to be submitted in ECTD format since May 2018. Now, what are the pre-approval and post-approval submissions in ANDAs? So, pre-approval submissions include original ANDA submissions before an ANDA approval. So, this includes the ANDA, basically the ANDA that the applicant provides, okay, and responses to any of the FDA communications prior to an ANDA approval. So, I give my ANDA to the FDA. If FDA finds that it's complete from all aspects in terms of the checklist, so it gives me an acknowledgement that it has been accepted for review. And once it is accepted for review, then it undergoes the review by the various 4 disciplines that we saw in the earlier slides. And based upon the review, the feedback that comes from the various disciplines, then we get the communication in terms of deficiency letters. That is called as a DRL, that is the discipline review letter, information request, complete response, and the amendments file, that is solicited and unsolicited. So let's understand what these DRL, IR, CR, and the amendments are about. So a discipline review letter will generally issued from each discipline as it finishes its initial review of its portion of a received ANDA. So it will not represent a complete review. A DRL does not represent a complete review of the entire submission and does not necessarily reflect input from all supervisory levels. It allows applicants to know as soon as possible early thoughts on possible deficiencies within specific sections of an application. So generally, once you file an ANDA, you generally receive a DRL. So as we saw in this slide, so it does not mean that it has come from all the disciplines. So there may be other disciplines that can come at any point of time. Then information requests. So a DRL basically we saw was intended to convey what were their early thoughts on the possible deficiencies during the review. However, an IR will request further information or clarification that is needed or would be helpful to proceed with the discipline review. So first a DRL comes where they give the preliminary thoughts and then comes the IR. As with DRL, an IR will not represent again a complete review of the entire submission and will not necessarily reflect inputs from all supervisory level. Again here, it's not that it will just come once, it can come multiple times. Now, what are the timings for this IR and DRL? So generally no later than about the midpoint of the GDUFA goal date, which we will see in the later slides. So discipline reviews will be complete and IRs and DRLs will have been issued. So once I submit, so somewhere in between the GDUFA goal date, the DRL review would be complete and then they will be either IR or DRLs that will be issued. So while DRL may only be issued after completion of a discipline review, IRs will be issued at any point of time. So IR and DRL responses. So how an ANDA responds to it. DRL and IR may contain a requested response date. So generally, it is seen that an IR has a time frame by which we have to respond. So an applicant may request a short extension if they are unable to respond by the requested date. And generally, it is seen that if it's short, FDA gives. But then there have been cases where FDA has refused to. So responses to an IR or DRL generally will not affect the review clock. FDA will strive to review a response during the review cycle in which it is reviewed if such a review can be completed during the review cycle. Now, what's the review clock for this IR and DRL? IR and DRL neither stops the review clock, as we said earlier, nor does it add to the GDUFA goal. So accordingly, a response to an IR or DRL will not be classified as a major or minor amendment and will not receive a new goal date. So if a response to an IR or DRL contains information not requested by FDA, or if FDA determines that the information provided requires a more thorough assessment, then FDA will classify such an amendment, such a submission as a major or minor amendment with the corresponding goal date. So generally, what is the industry practice is give information only what the FDA has asked. Do not give anything more than what is being asked, because otherwise agency will shift the goal date because they will require additional resources to review the information. So we also learned in the previous slides something on complete response letter. This is something that industry does not want. I mean, we try to avoid. So the practical impact of GURUFA 2 is that generic drug sponsors can expect to have their ANDAs reviewed and responded to within 10 months of submission. So the GURUFA goal date generally for an ANDA, that is the action date, is generally 10 months. So we expect that by 10 months an action is given. But if a CRL comes in between, then there are chances that your goal date of 10 months can be extended. So if the review does not result in approval, then the sponsor will receive a CRL. A CRL refers to a written communication to an applicant or a DMF holder from FDA. The CRL usually will be describing all the deficiencies that the agency has identified in the ANDA, including any pending amendments, or a DMF that must be satisfactorily addressed before the ANDA is approved. CRL will reflect a complete review, which includes an application-related facility assessment and will require a complete response from industry to restart the clock. So, as we said, we saw in the earlier slides, it's not that it's just the API information. It's also it's the drug product information. It's also the API information. So what goes in the ANDA submission, everything needs to be complete in terms of compliance before an ANDA is approved. If there is hold up in any one, then the ANDA can be delayed. The ANDA approval can be delayed. Now coming to amendments, what are solicited and unsolicited. So a solicited amendment is submitted in response to a CRL. So once a CRL has come to an applicant, so what the response that is submitted to the FDA is called a solicited amendment. So FDA has asked and I'm responding. An unsolicited amendment is submitted on applicant's own initiative. So in the CRL that FDA sends the applicant for which an ANDA amendment is filed, the agency will advise whether the amendment requires to be classified as major or minor. So when a CR comes in the letter itself, FDA very clearly will demarcate whether it's a minor or a major. So major amendment is submitted when the content which is provided by the applicant will require extensive assessment by the agency. So once I submit, then they will let me know whether it is major or minor. So examples of major amendments includes manufacturing a new batch. So that's obviously going to take time and review by the various reviewers. Performing a new BE study, that's expenditure of resources again from the agency's end, and developing new analytical procedure and providing full validation data. Minor amendments, in contrast to major amendment, they are those deficiencies which will require less assessment by the FDA, and these includes minor deficiencies in the DMF, incomplete dissolution data, labeling deficiencies that have not been adequately addressed. Now, unsolicited amendments, the ANDA applicant may also submit an amendment that is not prompted by an FDA noted deficiency. So sometimes it happens that a agency has not asked us to submit any amendment, but voluntarily we go forward and we submit this amendment. It may be a labeling change, and RLD has updated their labeling. So a generic applicant will go forward and submit an unsolicited amendment. So the amendment will be characterized as major or minor depending on the substance of the content in the amendment. Now FDA can, to their discretion, will determine whether to accept or defer the unsolicited amendment during the review cycle. Post-approval submissions, the various supplements that can be submitted, okay, for the drug substance, drug product, process, quality control, equipment or facilities during the product life cycle includes PAS or CB. So once basically an ANDA is approved, okay, that's when the post-approval submissions come into picture. So for the type of post-approval submissions majorly comes into two classes: the PAS, which is a major change, and CBE, or the change being effective, which is a moderate change. Then this also, the post-approval submissions also includes annual reports, which needs to be submitted each year within 60 days of the anniversary date of approval of the application. In addition to what we just saw, the post-approval submission also includes pharmacovigilance submissions. So that includes the adverse event reporting and periodic adverse drug experience reports. So adverse event reporting, these are to be done after you commercialize the drug product, and this is submitted to FDA electronically. Whereas the periodic adverse drug experience report, this needs to be submitted quarterly to the agency within the first 3 years of approval and annually thereafter throughout the life cycle of the ANDA. Coming to the Generic Drug User Fee Act, GDUFA, I will just rush through because I see that the time, I think I was given a slot till 12:45. I'll try to rush through. So what is this GDUFA all about? So the Generic Drug User Fee Act in 2017 was assigned came into action in 2017 to facilitate timely access to high quality and affordable generic medicines. So this is basically the GDUFA fee structure, which is a big pain for the industry, okay, in terms of the fees that have to be paid. So what you're looking at is the ANDA fee, which I've given for the financial year 2020 and in the next year. So you can see that the amount that has to be paid for an ANDA includes the ANDA fee, the DMF fee, the program fee. Now, what's the program fee all about? It includes if I'm having 20 or more approved ANDAs. So if a manufacturer has 20 or more approved ANDAs, then they fit into the large size. So you have to pay the amount that is corresponding to the large size. And then if it is less, then it falls under the medium and the small size. Again, an ANDA applicant has to pay even for the facility. So not only the ANDA applicant, even the API manufacturers or the contract manufacturing organizations. So the facility fees for the domestic API or the domestic finished drug formulations have been given, and also for the foreign. So since we are not based in USA and we have manufacturers from India, so for us the foreign fee will be applicable. So the current GDUFA goals. So this is what is important. So everything comes with a cost, right? So now earlier, prior to the GDUFA coming into existence, the ANDA approval time didn't have any fixed time, right? But now with the cost that has come into picture, there is a time slot that has given through which even the agency needs to work so as to give us the action by that particular defined goals. So this is what the GDUFA goal is all about. So the original ANDA application, when it is filed, the standard review, standard goal date is 90% of these ANDAs get the goal date is within 10 months of the submission. So within 10 months, an action is generally issued. So either it may be an approval or it may be a CR letter. Or then in case if it is a priority review, okay, if I have applied for a priority review. So when I say priority review means generally an applicant can file ANDA applicant will file for priority review in case where there are less than three manufacturers who are approved. So that can be an RLD and maybe 1 or 2 additional manufacturers. So if it is a priority review, then the approval can be happening within 8 months or within 10 months in case of if the PFC has changed or without a PFC. So what is a PFC? It's nothing but a submission facility correspondence. Amendments. So we saw that in case FDA gives us a deficiency, then what we respond is the amendment. So
Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
okay, sorry. Yeah. So the priority fee, so the priority ANDAs, so they have the lesser time period for approval than the standard. Same way for the amendments, you can see the time limit that is given for the standard major or the priority major. Now we saw that when we give a CR major is given, it extends the goal date by further 6 months. Whereas when a CR minor is issued, the goal date extends by 3 months. That means it is after 10 months, there's a further extension. Same way, we saw that post-approval, we do something called as PAS and CBEs. So CBE does not come under this particular scope, but PAS comes, and here the timelines have been given in terms of the period. So again, 6 months for standard, priority is 4 months. For PAS amendment, if any deficiencies came and if I have to respond, then further 6 months for a major and further 4 months for a priority major and 3 months in case of minor. The same is applicable for the GDUFA goals for the API DMF. So this is the references. Thank you. So I know I had to rush through the last few slides. I rushed through the last few slides just to see that I am in time against the slot that was given to me. So, Rajeshri ma'am.
Hi, Jacqueline. Anju.
Hi, Anjana.
Yeah, hi. Just 1 minute. There is one question. What is the time frame to get approval from ANDA for generic drug review process?
10 months.
10 months. Okay.
10 months.
Okay.
So within 10 months, it's not the approval, it's basically called an action letter. So within 10 months, if in the first cycle itself we get the ANDA is considered acceptable, then we get the approval. If not, then it can get extended. So 10 months they say as a GDUFA action date.
Okay. Anand, is your question been answered? One more new message, just a minute.
Yes, madam. Yes, thank you. Yes, madam. Thank you.
Any other questions from the delegates? Okay, so there's a lot of compliments for excellent session from you, Jacqueline. And of course,
so much.
The PDUFA and the DDUFA, those are new terms for us. We were not very, we didn't know much about that. And especially the money matters, we really don't know because it is not covered in our syllabus. So we just know what is happening. But that is why we need the industry and, academia bridging so that we can get updated. And that is why I was after you. So thanks for accepting the invitation finally and giving. It was a very good session. Any other questions from the delegates?
I can see Uday also there.
You can see?
Uday.
Uday
Golmal.
Uday Bolmal, sir, yeah. Oh, you knew him then, is it?
He was my batchmate in MPharm.
Okay, okay.
So I could see him during the session.
Yeah, but I don't know if he's there.
I think he's not there.
He's there, yeah. Okay, fine. Okay. So
thank you so much. It's really been a privilege to
Yeah.
address to the audience. I think you've been a wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thanks.
Have a good day. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you
a good
too.
weekend too. Okay, I request the delegates to be there, please. Okay, so what time is the next session? 3 o'clock. Okay, I request the
1 minute.
delegates to join in by 2:55 for your next session at scheduled at 3 p.m. Okay. Shall we end the meeting?
Anjana, madam. Anjana, madam.
Yeah. Yes,
Madam,
Mr. Anand Bhandari.
will you share the mail ID of the Ankit and Jacqueline ma'am?
Yes,
On the
definitely.
chat box?
Yes, yes. We will put it up on the group. We will share.
Okay. Thank you, madam.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you.